On a very special Thanksgiving edition of The World Over, an inspiring and entertaining show. George Weigel is here to discuss his latest book, a spiritual travelogue called City of Saints. Actor Wendell Pierce joins us to discuss the redemptive power of faith and art, and his memoir, The Wind in the Reeds, and the moving story of a father battling cancer while leaving his daughter both his wisdom and example. Garth Callahan, author of Napkin Notes, will join us on this very special edition of The World Over Live.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. A very happy Thanksgiving to those of you in the United States, and a happy day to everybody else. I love that all of our guests tonight are grateful for something in their lives. And at the end of the show, I'll tell you what I'm most grateful for. Tweet me at Raymond Arroyo and tell me what you're giving thanks for this year. Now to our first segment. The Synod of Bishops wrapped up last month in Rome, and the Jubilee Year of Mercy is about to get underway in December. Will there be changes in store for the Church in the coming year? My next guest is here to discuss all of it and give us his thoughts on the recent terror attacks in Paris. He also has a new book, City of Saints, A Pilgrimage to St. John Paul's Krakow. It's a beautiful spiritual journey through the sainted Pope's Polish homeland. Here is my exclusive interview with author and theologian, George Weigel. George, I want to start with the book, City of Saints. This is really, you call it a pilgrimage to John Paul II's Krakow. I think of it as an illuminated travel guide to John Paul's hometown. And it's both his personal story, and it's really the whole Church's story in this little town. In
this remarkable city where the 20th century happened in a distinctive way. All of the awfulness of the 20th century, particularly the middle 20th century, the Second World War, the Holocaust, the Soviet experience, and yet here in this remarkable place, the answer to all of that was given in the revelations of divine mercy emanating from the heart of Christ, experienced by the first saint of the 21st century, Sister Faustina. So with World Youth Day coming to Krakow next year, coming home in a sense, because that's where Wojtyła's youth ministry started.
Right.
I thought the way to introduce people to the city was through the life of its greatest son. So in addition to all of the usual guidebook stuff, the book is a spiritual pilgrimage, which I hope will help people.
No, you really get the contours of his entire life, and this town brings them alive, and you can re-experience it by going there. Now, you embedded for a long time here, working on the biography, yes, right. Witness to Hope, but you do a seminar in Krakow every year.
I teach in Krakow every July. I generally spend most of July in Krakow and have done so for over 15 years. That and other lectures and whatnot at Krakowian universities have brought me to the city for what I think is now over a total of 2.5 years. Wow. If you add it all up. The people of the city have been immensely welcoming to me, as I'm sure they will be to the pilgrims of World Youth Day next year. So in a sense, this book is a thank you note to a place I consider my third home. And I hope it does justice to a remarkable place.
You had an earlier book that was released, I think, last year, and it was on the beautiful churches of Rome, the
Roman pilgrimage.
Pilgrimage churches. And you collaborated with your son, Stephen, on that book. He's back here, who took all these glorious pictures. What was it like working with him? Because I imagine you were a part of this, the photography of the book as well, yes?
It was great. It was a bit more intense than Roman pilgrimage. There we were in Rome together for 2 months because we did the Station Church pilgrimage day by day. Here, the photography had to be done in 3 weeks flat.
Wow.
So we were at it every day in a very intense way with some great help as our logistics manager from the man who was John Paul II's first altar boy, who is now one of the world's most distinguished high-energy particle physicists and a great friend of mine, Piotr Maletsky, who drove us all around so we could get this job done. So it stretched from, you have a stretch of people from Karol Wojtyła's
life,
early priesthood to the post-John Paul II period, bringing this book together.
Beautiful. What do you want people to come away with as they read this? Many people who will never visit Krakow.
I hope they get an experience of how embedded, how gritty Catholicism is. Catholicism is about space as well as time. It's an incarnational faith, and it's alive in this remarkable city in a way that is really quite unique. So I hope people are able to experience the city, the history, the man, John Paul II, again, through this effort to provide Pilgrims for World Youth Day with a guidebook.
While I have you here, I have
Sure.
to get into some other issues. I know you were obsessively covering the Synod on the Family in Rome.
Intensively.
And, okay, intensely. Your takeaway from that? My thought is, just looking at this, the Church Fathers obviously went in one direction. They reaffirmed church teaching largely.
Right.
And you have another faction, many Jesuits close to the Pope, saying there's an opening here for divorced and remarried Catholics. It seems the Pope in the Year of Mercy wants to provide some sort of gesture to this group of people. Do you see that? Do you think that's what's in the offing?
I have no idea what's in the Holy Father's mind. I think the facts of the matter are that the Synod reaffirmed the Church's understanding of the Eucharist, of the sacramental life, of the nature of marriage. The talk in the famous paragraph 85 of the final report, which I may say is a massive improvement over the working document for the Synod, which we discussed months ago. The famous paragraph 85 anchors this discernment in the internal forum, to use the technical language, in, quote, according to the teaching of the Church. Those 7 words are absolutely crucial. They were inserted in at the last minute. I discuss all of this in an article that'll be available in early December in First Things called What Really Happened at Synod 2015, and perhaps your viewers might want to be aware of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's talk for a moment about something the Pope said the other day.
Right.
He was talking, it was an interfaith prayer gathering with Lutherans, and a Lutheran woman gets up and says, when am I going to be able to share the Eucharist with my Catholic husband? And the Pope said, go to the Lord, pray, and then essentially go your way. And he said, this is the quote, there aren't differences between us and doctrine becomes the same. Doctrine, he said, is a difficult word to understand, but I ask myself, don't we share the same baptism? How do you read that? What should people interpret there?
I read the whole episode as an attempt by, as quite probably an attempt by certain German churchmen to relitigate a case they lost at the Synod. The working document for the Synod included a paragraph number 128, which was an open invitation to intercommunion, which frankly is an insult to Lutherans. It suggests to them that they may believe something that they don't believe. That was knocked out of the box completely during the language group discussions at the Synod. It was just flatly rejected. There's no hint of it in the final report. And I would be very interested to know if that question was planted through that lady, taking advantage of her situation in order to relitigate a case that had already been lost.
There is a distinction too, George, and it's very hard, both for journalists and for the general public, because they hear the Pope say something, and to distinguish the Pope's utterances from church teaching is very difficult for them. What is the difference?
The Pope was responding on the spur of the moment to someone in distress. The settled teaching of the Catholic Church on the circumstances in which a non-Catholic may receive Holy Communion at Mass are laid out quite clearly in the Catechism. I would refer people to that.
I want to touch on Regensburg, the Regensburg Address, the famous, now seemingly prophetic speech of the Holy Father, Pope Benedict. You wrote a book called The Cube and the Cathedral around the same time. Tell me about looking back on this and what was in that book and what Pope Benedict said, what didn't we understand and what should we revisit now?
Well, I think what Western European elites and political leaders have never understood is that you cannot defend Western civilization from the assault of jihadist Islam unless you are prepared to defend the superiority of Western political life to the caliphate.
Yeah.
This refusal to man up and say, no, I'm sorry, this way of doing the public business is morally superior to the kind of stuff we see going on in Syria and Iraq today, is the absolute precondition to any form of successful address to this problem, either on the ground in Syria and Iraq or in dealing with these immigrant populations. But the tyranny of self-flagellation that has gone on in Western civilization for the past 50 years is making it virtually impossible for it to defend itself.
Does the church have a role in engaging Islam? Because
Sure.
contrary to what we're hearing out there, there is a link between Islam and these jihadi actions. This isn't, the Presbyterians aren't doing this.
No.
Or the Mormons. There's something in the in the belief that's fueling the ideology.
To go back to Regensburg, Pope Benedict absolutely correctly identified the two issues that have to be resolved inside the House of Islam for it to be able to live with the non-Islamic world. One is Islam has to find a way within its own religious self-understanding to underwrite religious tolerance, and it has to find a way within its own self-understanding to distinguish between spiritual and political authority. As long as Islam remains, particularly this activist part, this jihadist part, beholden to a 7th century view of these questions, it is going to be a very dangerous thing, and that has to be resisted.
Before I let you go, Thanksgiving is upon us. What are you most thankful for this year, George Weigel?
I think we should all, in light of Paris, be thankful for the gift of freedom. This will be the theme of my Catholic Press column next week. But we also have to understand what is inscribed on the Korean War Veterans Memorial a few miles from where we're sitting here in Washington. Freedom is never free, and freedom has to be lived nobly if it's going to be defended successfully.
Very good, George Weigel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Raymond.
George Weigel's new book, City of Saints, A Pilgrimage to John Paul II's Krakow, is available at bookstores everywhere and online and through EWTN's religious catalog. When we return, actor, New Orleanian, and author of the new memoir, The Wind in the Reeds, Wendell Pierce joins us to talk about the faith, art, and the town that he's grateful for. This Thanksgiving edition of The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. He's a distinguished actor, best known for his work in The Wire as well as Treme. He's also a native son of New Orleans. He writes movingly about the redemptive power of faith and art in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. He joined me in our Washington studio to discuss his memoir recently, The Wind in the Reeds, a storm, a play, and a city that would not be broken. Here's my exclusive interview with the great Wendell Pierce. You grew up in Pontchartrain Park,
yes,
which is a beautiful enclave near Pontchartrain,
yeah,
Lake Pontchartrain. You called it a Black Mayberry.
Yeah.
Tell people what it was like and what happened in Katrina.
Pontchartrain Park is one of those classic American neighborhoods. It was post-World War II, sort of Levittown suburbia.
Right.
And Gentilly Woods was a white neighborhood.
Right.
And there was this ditch that separated us, and Pontchartrain Park was the separate but equal. And I like to say, and one of our pioneer neighbors said it, we took something ugly and made it beautiful, and it became an incubator for black talent. Dutch Morial, the first black mayor, his son Mark Morial, who is now the national president of the Urban League, Terrence Blanchard, Grammy Award winner.
Yeah, of course.
So it's historic. You know, multi-denominational churches.
Yes.
You had, Southern University at New Orleans. So it was a perfect place, but we were also in the deepest part of the flooding. And I knew that we owed it to our parents' generation who fought long and hard to make something beautiful like that. This Black Mayberry where I could go anywhere. So that's why I went back to my neighborhood of Pontchartrain Park and started to rebuild.
Now, you were an actor in New Orleans. We both went to the New Orleans Center of Creative Arts, NOCA, which is this institution that it was in a simple building on Perrier Street for a long time uptown. Now it's in this grand, fantastic facility that we never imagined.
I know.
But it really shaped you. You went on to Juilliard. You end up coming back post-Katrina in 2007, and you're in the classic Waiting for Godot.
Right.
And it was staged in New York, but then it was restaged in New Orleans in the lower Ninth Ward. Tell me about that production, because that is really the key that opens up a real understanding for you about the intermingling of art and faith and where you came from.
I realized that 20 years from now, someone's going to ask, Mr. Pierce, what did you do in New Orleans' darkest hour? I was an actor. I wanted to respond with my art. And so with the Classical Theater of Harlem, we did Waiting for Godot with 15,000 gallons of water, a rooftop coming out of it, and Estragon opening up, sitting on that rooftop, looking up. And it was every image we had seen that awful week of Katrina. And I waded in through the water and my bags. And so it was an image that was so clear. And we did it in the lower Ninth Ward, right where hundreds had died. Wow. And the play is about the desolation and the loss of these two men. They don't know who they are, where they came from. And out of that desolation, they realize that they're waiting for Godot, someone outside of themselves, some entity outside of themselves, but they have to find it within themselves ultimately to save themselves. That whatever they were looking for was already in them. That's ultimately where the classic play speaks to people. You know? And there was the most cathartic moment of my life in the middle of that production, where New Orleanians who had come from across the city, rich and poor, white and black, old and young, the lawyer and the longshoreman, sitting next to each other, all affected by this great flood and disaster of New Orleans. And I turned to them in the play, and I just really was a moment where I just stepped out of character and turned to the audience and said, at this place, in this moment in time, all mankind is us. Let us do something while we have the chance. And it is in that moment where we all realized it's on us.
We have to do something.
We have to do something, and we have to come back. And that was the thing that made me realize the power of what I was doing, of that art. So many people to this day spoke to me and said, I saw that, and it gave me hope, it gave me vision. And it's that sort of transcendent nature of art that connected me to how we connect to our culture in New Orleans. It has always been a city and a place where that intersection between life and the people in themselves, that intersection is our culture and art. It's tangible, it's real, it's not just ethereal, it's not just a piece of entertainment. And that sort of transcendence also awoke me to what spirit and spirituality is all about. And it reminded me how much that was a part of my life too. So that one cathartic moment reminded me of the power of art, reminded me of the power of art and culture specifically in New Orleans, how it was a thing of revelation, it was a thing of rebellion, a thing of insurrection, and also reminded me of the connection and the transcendent nature of, in a brief moment that you can have, mortals can have, where they find some immortality, and that transcendence is really about what spirit is, and it reminded me of the journey that I have when it comes to my faith and my spirit.
Yeah, no, and the Catholic faith here of your mother really pops on the pages of The Wind in the Reeds in a tangible way. There's a line, you were just talking about New Orleans, there's a line near the end of the book where you write, the Bible tells us to walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. New Orleans tells us, no, don't walk. Pull out your handkerchief. raise high your parasol and dance.
Right.
And that really is the spirit of the city right there.
That is the spirit of the city. And you know, I tell people all the time, when you see a second line, remember it came out of, we have social aid and pleasure clubs.
Yeah,
you know,
that's right.
We understand the pleasure part. Oh, it's going to be a good party, it's going to be a good dance, it's going to be good music. But people forget about the social aid part. They are benevolent associations. Came out of an ugly time where people couldn't get burial plots. They couldn't go to and get health care. They couldn't go and and get insurance. So they pooled their money in these social aid and pleasure clubs, a benevolence association. Raymond, your daddy takes sick, we're gonna take care of you. Your mama passes away, we're gonna send her off nice. You know, that's what a second line is about. That's what a jazz funeral is about. It was showing that the community pooling their resources to make sure to take care of you, and pooling their resources to make sure they take care of you in spirit as well.
Now, I wept many times reading this, certainly because of the New Orleans connection, but there is that pulsing heart of family and history that beats through this whole book and through the city itself. And that people love the food, they love the music. That's just the overflow of the love and the family and the community that we know, that I think people who are visiting or outsiders don't quite get a full picture of. This book gives you a much fuller picture of it, particularly the lived black experience in New Orleans. From slavery, you talk about your great-grandfather, grandfather, right up until your mother, this educated woman, strong Catholic woman. Absolutely. Tell me about her. T.
We called my mother T because my older brother grew up with my first cousins. So we had T. Evelyn and T. Vaughn and T. May, all of these aunts, and the kids couldn't say Althea. So they just said T, and there's T. And so he called her T. And so when we came along, we said T as well. My mother was a devout Catholic. She loved the Blessed Mother. I remember during Lent we would read, we would say the Rosary every night in my father's study. A family that prays together stays together.
That's right.
My mother was also coming from the experience of African Americans and the ugliness of segregation and racism.
Even the segregated church.
Even the segregated church. We don't go to the church in our neighborhood because it was over in Gentlewood Woods.
I know right where it is.
And when she first went there, they said, "Excuse me, the Negro pews are in the back." She sat in my mother and father. Any church in the world is going to be on the right side, the fifth row, fifth pew. And she said, I walked out of that church going towards the back, you know, and I kept walking. I said, we'll never go back there again. And my mother, through that experience, and experiences that had happened to my grandmother, even worse, where, you know.
But it's amazing they kept their faith through that, and
the
she was so devoted.
And the reason was, my mother always said, there's that which is man-made and that which is divine. We go to church to connect with the divine, and man is fallible. So we were never taught to revere the men and women of the church. You respected the men and women of the church because they made a commitment and have been called by a vocation, but understand that they're fallible.
Right.
And we go to church to pray to God and to connect with that divinity. So we have always said, make that separation. And it's the same way we deal with America, you know, which is you love this country and what this country can be, and you have to challenge it all the times when it doesn't live up to its own ideals. You know, I like to tell people it's like a drunken parent. I love you, but you got to stop drinking.
Your mother had this, you talked about her great devotion and her great faith. You have a really important thing that happens in your life. In 2012, you're doing Treme, and you really get to spend those last years of her life with her. What did she teach you in those moments?
I'll never forget. Treme was a real godsend because it wasn't just a television show. It was a therapeutic thing for the people of New Orleans. But at the same time, I got to spend the last 4 years of my mother's life with her and be home. And I remember near the end, my mother told me, Wendell, I'm dying. I said, oh no, listen, all we have to do is get you back in shape. She said, Wendell, I'm dying. She said, you need to stay in church. You need to go to church. I am not a lapsed Catholic.
Yeah.
I am, I have always been challenged with my faith ever since I was a little boy, something that's lifelong. My confirmation name is Thomas, and I purposely picked Thomas, I wanted,
The doubter.
The doubter.
Explain it to me. Let me touch.
Yeah, let me touch until I can touch his hand.
But and in that exchange, she told you, "Go. I want you to go to church." And you said, "Wait, I go to church."
I go to church, and she said, "No, I mean really go to church. I want you to understand that. I want you to go back to church and find, your spirit again." So for my 50th birthday, with that in mind, I didn't want a big party or whatever. I said, I'm going to find, she loved the Blessed Mother, so I said, where were those visions? Oh, I thought of Guadalupe, I thought of different places. And I said, oh no, Fatima. And my birthday is December 8th.
Oh, the Immaculate Conception.
And it was on a Sunday that year, my 50th birthday. So I have this vision of going to Portugal and going to be
And you go alone on your 50th
I go alone.
birthday.
I wanted to go alone. And I realized I wanted to be with her. Ultimately, I wanted to be with her. I knew this was the place. And I thought, I had this vision of, the three peasant children in the middle of a field.
Beautiful field, a
and
little grotto.
there's going to be all of us going towards this pilgrimage. And I got there in this beautiful basilica with 100,000 people. And I couldn't believe it. And they take the Blessed Mother out once a year on...
They carry her out.
They carry her out for the procession. And this was special because it was the Immaculate Conception. It was on a Sunday. And so they brought her out. And as the procession is leading out, I look as a New Orleanian and I see all the pilgrims raising their handkerchiefs in the air.
Oh, wow.
As they say, this was actually after the Mass, they're bringing her back to her place, waving goodbye to the Blessed Mother. And in that moment, I knew that what I was really searching for was what my mother had asked me to search for. Find your faith again. I realized that I was also grieving. It's a year later after her death. And it was that moment that I knew that she was okay. And that she was like, I've given you everything you need. I've taught you everything you need in life. Be the man that I expect you to be. And I could say goodbye to my mother finally. I knew that's what the trip was all about. And that what my pilgrimage was all about.
In the book you say in that moment, she was telling me to keep the faith. I believe, T.
Yes.
I believe.
Absolutely. She was telling me to keep the faith. And I do believe. And the beautiful thing about it was I knew then there's an absolute presence to my mother. That was the thing. There wasn't an end to life. There's an ongoing presence that my mother is in me, and faith is in me, and God is in me.
I love how the book combines your art. It tells really your whole story, and we can only touch on a few of these details, but you've got to read the book. It really is a moving experience, and certainly was for me. I love the connection you ultimately make between art and religion, and how important, how dependent art is on religion. You have a great line. Art is a kind of sacrament, you write. A sacrament that induces within you an experience of transcendence, a connection to the eternal, and of unity with all humanity.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I realized, that when we speak about art, we know what thoughts are to the individual when they lie awake at night and reflect on who they are, where they've been, who they hope to become. The forum of art is where we as a community reflect on where we've been, where we've failed, where we've triumphed, where we hope to go, where we declare our values and then we act on them. And it's in that communal experience that we find transcendence and a cathartic thing that is an essential part of what faith is about also. that it induces the behavior, and in that brief moment, we understand how we are most like our Creator, and that we are all connected, and that we have to tap into that to realize the transcendent nature of our experience.
Yeah.
And that is what spirit and faith is all about.
Yeah, and how connected we all are.
And I have to be reminded of that happens in Mass. It is that.
Yeah,
You know,
the bringing
it's
of
the communal.
it all comes
it is
together.
The Eucharist, you know,
Yeah.
and that's what art was for me, and that's what the connection is to religion and faith.
Yeah.
More than anything, faith is for me.
Well, you certainly experience it in this book, and I've seen it in your great characters over the years, and look forward to many more. Wendell Pierce,
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. The Wind and the Reeds, A Storm, a Play, and a City That Would Not Be Broken by Wendell Pierce is available at bookstores everywhere and online. It's a very moving read, one definitely worth your time. When we return, it was one of the most memorable unseen hero segments ever. Cancer survivor and author Garth Callahan. His story reminds us to be grateful for each moment of life and the connections we make in them. When This World Over Thanksgiving Special continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. My next guest doesn't know how much time he has left to live, but he's made the most of every minute to deepen his connection to the people he loves most. Garth Callahan has had 4 bouts with cancer, and he's been writing little notes to his daughter on napkins since she was in kindergarten. Keeping that link with his daughter became his mission. Now he wants to convince others to do the same in their families. He joined me in studio to talk about his new book, Napkin Notes, Creating a Daily Connection with Those You Love. And what could be more important to remember at Thanksgiving? Here's Garth Callahan. Garth, I want to start with this amazing journey you went on that culminated in the book, in Napkin Notes, which I just love the title and I love the message here. Walk me back to the moment when these little napkin notes that you wrote to your daughter starting at 5 and inserted in her lunchbox, when did that take on new meaning for you?
Well, the first time it took on new meaning was when she was in about 3rd grade, and I had finished making her lunch, and I hadn't yet put a note into her lunchbox. And I wasn't slacking off, I just hadn't done it yet.
Yeah.
And she scooped up her lunch bag, and she noticed that there was no note, and she stepped over to me and looked up at me and held out her bag and simply asked, "Napkin note?" So that's when I knew that it really mattered to her, that she was paying attention to these handful of words that I was putting on.
And what were on the notes? Tell people what were on the notes.
Back then they were very simple. I love you, have a great day, good luck on your science test today, have a fun time in gym. They were very simple. They don't have to be profound. As she grew older, I tried to come up with things that would help motivate her or inspire her, notes that were stronger. And sometimes I looked to others for suggestions. So I would borrow a quote, and I could write something from Dr. Seuss, like, "Why fit in when you were born to stand out?"
Stand out, yeah.
And then the notes took on real meaning, real deep meaning, after my first cancer diagnosis.
In 2011.
Correct.
And what happened at that point?
Well, so I was diagnosed with cancer. It was seemingly simple. Go in, have surgery, cut out the tumor, cut out my kidney.
You'll be fine.
I'll be fine. And that happened right before Christmas. As we exited Christmas vacation, life seemed to go back to normal. I started making lunches again. Emma went back to school. I went back to work. And we were trying to be normal. But in the back of my head, I kept worrying about cancer. And I felt that Emma was as well. And about 2 months after she went back to school that year, I saw that she had been keeping the notes. She had been ripping off the things I had been writing to her and cataloging them in a notebook.
Wow. And what have these come to represent? Not only for her, but for you.
So I'm just as inspired by these notes. the act of me taking 30 or 45 seconds in the morning, 2 minutes on a tougher morning, and really pouring my heart into these notes, I want Emma to understand how much I love her. I want her to understand what tenacity is, because I'm still fighting. I want her to understand, I never want her to question what our values are or what we believe in. And so at any time she can go to any of the notes that I've written and understand what our family's about.
You are now in the middle of your third diagnosis. You're battling this thing for the third time. That clarifies the mind.
It
I
does.
imagine.
I wake up every morning. The first thing I do is I say, wow, thank you, God. I'm awake.
I have another day.
One more day.
Yeah.
And then I really think to myself, what is the most important thing that I need to do today? And I'm going to do that thing no matter what. No matter how badly I feel from the treatment or what else gets in my way. But that's the thing that I'm going to do today.
And this has become a mission for you.
This
is not just, it's cute that I write a note to my daughter. You want others to recognize they have a need and should have a desire to connect with those they love.
Absolutely. And it goes well beyond a parent-child relationship, I think. It could even extend to the workforce. Imagine if you came into work one day and your manager had a handwritten note that was left at your desk. Great job on that presentation yesterday. What type of meaning does that hold as opposed to a thank you email? So my wife, about a year ago actually, I was starting a new job, and my wife had gone out and started my car for me so that the ice would come off of the windshield. I got into my car and there was a note. Have a great first day. I love you. That note is still in my car and I see it every single day.
It leaves an impression.
Absolutely.
It's a piece of you when you leave your
You're right.
hand.
It's tangible. It's not a text message. It's not an email. And I'm a geek. I love those things.
Yeah.
But having that note is personal.
You talk in the book about leaving the faith. You're a Catholic, raised a Catholic. You leave the faith and then you find your way back after the cancer diagnosis?
Yes. In the middle of.
And you go and talk to Father Dan.
Correct.
In the parish.
Correct.
And you went to him because you were legitimately pretty angry.
I was. I was very angry and bitter with God. And not for myself. I was angry and bitter because I was looking at a future that my daughter did not have her dad. And that broke my heart. So I sat down with Father Dan, who didn't really know me. I knew him much more than he knew me. And we were sitting in his parish office after hours. We were just talking. We were talking about cancer and treatment and God and
Because
religion.
he had cancer as well. He had
Correct.
prostate cancer, yeah.
And we were just having a conversation, and the conversation turned all of a sudden, and he looked at me and he said, "Are you angry with God?" And I thought, oh great, how can I answer this?
Yeah.
I can sit here and lie to my parish priest and say, oh no, everything's great.
Yeah.
Or I can admit that I'm angry with God, and in my mind I was committing blasphemy sitting in the parish office.
Yeah.
And I started to cry. And he knew the answer. He knew the answer before he even asked the question. And he said, that's okay. He's got broad shoulders. He can handle that. And I thought, oh, this is not something that I expected. And I didn't really anticipate the conversation turning that way.
How has it deepened your faith?
There are a lot of steps that I've taken since that conversation. And frankly, the Knights of Columbus in my parish, they asked me to join the Knights. They had no idea how troubled I was at the time. And here was this group of men that their sole purpose was to help others in the community. And so between the conversation with Father Dan and becoming active in the Knights of Columbus, I recognized that my lousy cancer is the least of my problems. That is nothing for me to focus on. If I can focus on helping others, whether it's helping parents write notes to their kids or helping other cancer patients navigate the waters of their medical treatment, I can focus on them and focus a lot less on me.
There's a fantastic line at the end of this chapter where you write about Father Dan, and you say, the dark times we experience in life are not because God has left, but because we've turned away. And the joy he experiences when we turn back is unimaginable.
I paraphrase something that I learned from one of the parables in the Bible. And when the son returns to the father, the father's been standing there waiting for him to come back after he spent the inheritance and he's wasted all of that time and money and he's sinned. But the dad has always been standing there waiting for him. And that's how God is with us.
Tell me what happened last year when you received the 4th cancer diagnosis. You make a decision.
Correct. So let's be really honest. I freaked out.
I'll imagine.
Right. So my doctors.
Or I can't imagine.
My doctors have, and it's not that it's this diagnosis. It's this type of diagnosis, and my doctors have a very serious conversation with me. And whether they start talking about statistics in 5-year lifespans, or median lifespans, or however they slice and dice the numbers, it doesn't look good. And so I grabbed some calendars and counted up how many school days there were going to be between then and my daughter's high school graduation. And it was 826, if I counted correctly. I think I did. And so I sat down with a pen and a lot of napkins, and I just started writing. And I did it at night in the dark of the house because I didn't want my family to know that I was doing this in case I died.
And you see this as a long-term gift to her?
I do. I grew up in a family full of undertakers. My dad was a mortician, my mom's dad, an uncle, a cousin. And so we've had very frank discussions of death and dying, but never about me. Right?
Yeah. It's always somebody else.
It's always somebody else.
It's always
exactly.
somebody else. And this is the thing the book draws out. It reminds us, those saint pictures, they always had the skull and bones in the corner. Well, that was to remind you, this is the end for all of us.
We are all mortal.
Right.
And so I recognize that at some point in time I'm going to die. Hopefully not today, hopefully not this year, but at some point in the future. And I hope that Emma can recognize the gift that I have left her in these notes. Ideally, my goal is to live long enough to hand them over to her personally on her high school graduation day.
Well, we pray for that.
Amen.
Now, you also say the book is not about cancer and dying.
Correct.
It's about making connections.
It is.
What are people at home missing? What are we not doing that we should be doing?
We're not holding each other's hands. We are not looking around our community. My community has lifted me up and has carried my family for over a year. And I'll share some quick examples. Cancer is a very expensive disease to fight. And we have financially struggled for the past 12 months or so. We would come home and find gift cards to grocery stores in our mailbox. We came home last December after being out for an afternoon, and there were presents all over our front porch. And there were personalized presents. There were presents for our dog. There was a back scratcher, and I read the symbolism into that. Garth, we're scratching your back. We have continued to receive because people are paying attention. My next door neighbor, Mike, mows my lawn from time to time because I don't have the energy or stamina to do that. So on Saturday mornings, I have to be humbled and I watch my wife mow the lawn. Now, look, I don't love to mow the lawn, but I don't want to be in that position. So Mike, from time to time, does that. So really, this book is about paying attention to those who might need your help. Build a connection. Just do something simple for them. It doesn't have to be big. We don't have to cure cancer. We don't have to solve world hunger. What we have to do is help one person in need. And my favorite quote today, it's something I wrote on Emma's napkin a few months ago, and I hold this dear to me, is a quote by Mother Teresa. If you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one.
True, true. You have continued to work.
Yes.
Even though there is the doctors say, there's a finite amount of time. Why have you decided to continue working?
Well, part of it is I think I'm serving my family. So by working, we are able to remain normal. I took a class a while ago on on how to best serve your family financially. And one of the things that they shared there is if your family is in debt or you're kind of struggling, it's okay for the dad to go deliver pizzas a couple of nights a week. That there's honor in that, and that's serving your family. So by me continuing to work, I'm serving my family as best as I can. Yes, I'm mortal, but I could live 40 more years. So if I were to give up my career now and suddenly 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we have no revenue, no income, and we've spent all of our savings, that's a challenge.
That could be a problem.
Right.
That could be a problem.
Live as if I'm not going to die.
What would be your advice to others who might want to leave their own napkin notes?
Just start today. There is no time like the present to start something. Well done is better than well said. It doesn't. Writing a note is not. I'm not looking to become the next Hemingway. It's a pen and a piece of paper and 3 words. I love you. That's an easy way to start.
There's going to be a movie?
Rumor has it that New Line Cinema, and I joke, New Line Cinema is in the process of purchasing the movie, or purchasing the book, and we're very excited about the fact that our story will be shared, and hopefully we can inspire some more parents to do the same thing.
What do you want your legacy to be, Garth?
I only need one personal legacy. And the purpose of the book, the reason why I have the life lessons in there are for Emma. And whether it's 5 years from now or 50 years from now, I don't want Emma to ever question who I was or what I stood for. And she has said already at 15 that she's committed to writing notes to her children. I couldn't imagine a better legacy.
Yeah, I love the note you left her once. I love to watch you play. Beautiful.
So, somebody, I won't take credit for that, by the way. Somebody else wrote that in a blog post, and I read it, but I took it to heart. Whenever I go to any of her sports games, I always say that to her every time. It takes the pressure off.
It's a great line.
I'm not looking for you to win. It'd be great if you did, but I love to watch you play.
Napkin Notes, creating a daily connection with those you love, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. He's an inspiration. Before we leave you, this is our 19th Thanksgiving together, 19. And I personally want to thank all of you, our loyal and supportive viewing family. You're the best audience in television. Some of you have been with us from the very beginning, and others have just found us recently, so you get a few points off. We're so thankful for all of you, for making the world over part of your lives. You're the reason we toil each week trying to find the news, the guests, the perspectives that will most interest you. And I'm personally thankful to Mother Angelica for her incredible witness and sacrifice over so many years. This time of year, I'm particularly mindful of dear Mother. Keep her in your prayers. On behalf of our team, Christopher Edwards, Christina Kelly, and James Faulkner, whom I am also very, very thankful for, I wish you all a safe and happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy every moment of it with your family and friends. And I hope you'll be here next week. I'm very excited to announce the launch of my new story-oriented literacy initiative, because good stories orient us in our lives. To kick off next week on December 3rd, we will be joined by best-selling children's author of The Kingdom Keepers and Peter and the Starcatcher series, Ridley Pearson. The great thing about Story-Oriented is it will give you a chance to ask questions of your favorite authors live. It's really an international book club. I'll explore the author's background, the stories that shaped their work, and then you get to tweet or call in your questions live. Be sure to join us. Tune in on December 3rd, especially you Ridley Pearson fans, for a very special broadcast. Well, that is all the time we have. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.
Amen.